Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to our session. Today, we're going to be talking about automation and artificial intelligence, and really, we're going to focus on the future of better SAP processes. I'm Andrew Hayden. I'm the Senior Product Marketing Manager for the Automate products here at Precisely, and I am happy that everyone is here today. Now, today we have the absolute privilege of being joined by one of the smartest people in the SAP world that I know, and that is Paul Ovigel from ERPfixers. And Paul, if you'd take a minute and introduce yourself, tell the folks a little bit about your background and sort of who you are. And I know you're going to talk about ERPfixers in a little while, but let's learn a little bit about you.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks for having me. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the session. Name is Paul Ovigel. I've been a SAP consultant in the finance and controlling space for the last over 20 years, dealing in things like general ledger, universal journal, material ledger, product costing. I help customers more with implementation optimization than support, but we also have a team of skilled experts to do support as well. I'm kind of very passionate about the finance part of SAP, and so if there's any questions about finance or how we can automate things better, feel free to check in with me at some point. Thank you. Thanks, Andrew.
Great. Thanks, Paul. And just to remind everybody, please, if you've got questions, I'm not sure whether we're going to have time. We know how long this session may run. But if you do have questions during the session, please type them into the question box and somebody will get back to you, either myself or somebody from Precisely or Paul or somebody from ERPfixers. So please do not hesitate to ask any questions. Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? Well, first of all, I'm going to start off and I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about automation and digital transformation and why they have become really so important, especially in the last few years, and what is that relationship between the two. Built off of that and growing off of that information, we're going to talk about artificial intelligence and automation, especially as it relates to SAP. I think there's a lot of exciting things happening in that area, and I think it's important to look at kind of what do we see is going to happen initially and what is Precisely going to be able to offer you really in the very near future. Okay, so automation and digital transformation. It's really kind of interesting in the last 5 or so years. I mean, automation's been around in the SAP space for a while, but it really came to the fore during COVID as COVID hit, and a lot of people realized that they've done a lot for their digital transformation efforts around data. How are we digitizing our processes? How are we digitizing our data? How are we trying to get our data to a state where we can actually make it usable? But what many people overlooked was the importance of process as it relates to data. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that and kind of where we see those things going. And it's also really interesting, we've been automating SAP processes now for about 20 years. Many of you probably have heard of us from before when we were Wind Shuttle. Well, we are now part of Precisely. Looking at how customers have responded and what's changed with customers over the last 4 or so years, the customer needs, the fundamental customer needs that we see when we talk to people really haven't changed at all. That need for agility, the need for speed, and the need to improve the quality and integrity of our most important data. And for all of us, our most important data really is that core SAP data. Now, when we talk about being more agile, traditionally, agility was all about competitive advantage. We need to be able to move faster than our competitor. We need to change and adjust more quickly. Since the pandemic, it's really added or really continued to be that, but also added to that is we need to be able to respond to disruption. When the pandemic hit, it was this massive disruption, and we were all forced to pivot and change and move very, very quickly. And automation is a really, really great way to get your organization in a place where it can make those adjustments, it can make those changes, and get that agility, not only to gain that competitive advantage, but to be able to respond to these disruptive events. In terms of going faster, I mean, that's kind of an eternal one. We need to be able to go faster all the time because business is always getting faster. There's a really great Justin Trudeau quote, which he said a number of years ago, but it continues to be true. And the quote is, "The pace of change has never been this fast, but it will never be this slow again." And don't think about that too hard. It will make your head hurt. But it's really true. I mean, the pace of our business processes and the pace of our businesses is constantly accelerating. And for a long time, we're able to keep up with it by just throwing bodies at the problem. But That isn't really as possible anymore. Labor markets are really tight. It's difficult to hire people. It's difficult in many cases to retain people. So automation is a great way to be able to go faster and keep up with that pace of change as it goes, as it increases over time. And then improving the quality and integrity of our most important data. And again, the data we're going to talk about today, the data I'm going to talk about is really focusing on a broader set of master data in SAP. And then Paul's going to really focus in and hone in on that financial data and those finance processes. But being able to improve those, automation, again, really can help you do that. So, and it's really interesting, again, when we look at digital transformation. This is from a company called HFS, and they're an analyst firm that focuses on automation primarily out of the UK, but they also are based in New York. So the quote is, technology is a means to an end, but data is the currency of digital transformation. And while I agree with this, I would argue very strongly that it is incomplete, because it's not just about the data. You cannot overlook this interdependence of process and data. You can't do a process improvement initiative without looking at the data that process is creating and managing, because if that process creates bad data and you improve the process, guess what you've done? You've just created a lot of bad data very, very quickly. Same thing on the data side of it. If you're doing a data quality initiative and you're not looking at the processes that are creating and managing that data, you will eternally be doing a data quality changes and updates. And admittedly, precisely makes some of the best data quality products in the world. But I really think you want to find ways to take into account how are you creating that bad data and fix that. And that's where that process and data interdependence comes in. So from a standpoint of looking at that crossover between process and data, automation and digital transformation, I think this is one of the core ideas we need to think about is where is that interdependence of process and data? And it kind of fits across the entire digital transformation story. Automation has become a much more prevalent part of our digital transformation story, but it also includes things like those end-to-end process integration and user experience and process intelligence and lots of different aspects of digital transformation, of which artificial intelligence and machine learning has become a much more prominent part. So how does artificial intelligence fit into all this? Well, yeah, I showed you this, and yeah, it suddenly in the last year or so has gone from everything being on equal footing to artificial intelligence and machine learning. Everyone's screaming about it. Oh my God, it's so important. And it is, but it really offers a lot of opportunities. However, one of the things we have to consider is, what are we talking about when we talk about artificial intelligence? There are lots of different flavors of it. And for us in the SAP world, and precisely when we look at it, it really falls into two specific categories. One is generative AI, the other is predictive AI. You hear a lot about generative AI. Generative AI is Bard and Gemini and ChatGPT and all those large learning models that really are designed to create content based on a prompt. And they're really good at it. You can write an article. I can go to ChatGPT and ask it to write me a nice article about the importance of automation and artificial intelligence for SAP processes, and I will get a 1,000-word article very nicely in about 25 seconds. That's great, but it's not what we're going to talk about today. When we're talking about artificial intelligence, at least from the precisely standpoint, we're talking about predictive AI. And one of the best ways to think of predictive AI is really, we like to think of it as machine learning on steroids. It is taking intelligence and adding it to your traditional machine learning models. And it's really great for making accurate predictions based on those statistical algorithms and a data set. And one of the key things about predictive AI is it can be just your data. You don't have to train it on a big, massive, large language or large learning model like generative AI requires. I think some of the ChatGPTs and Gemini and so forth, they essentially mined the entire internet. Well, with predictive AI, it can just be your data. And I'm going to show you an example of what we are going to be launching here very soon in terms of artificial intelligence and predictive AI for SAP processes. Because what it allows you to do is take your historical data, feed the algorithm to train it initially. And the result is you can put in only a little bit of information and get your complete record out. And again, I'll show you what that looks like in just a second. And it's really good for predictions. And it's predicting things like the likelihood of field values, of routings, of what are the various things that you want that SAP record to do. So what does this look like? Well, let's talk about master data and let's talk about material in particular, because honestly, that's what we're starting with it precisely. Um, Material master is one of those ones that just has tons and tons of data in it across, whether you're in the SAP GUI or whether you're in Fiori or GUI for HTML. There's a lot of different screens you have to learn. I did some research and it figured that on average, there are 300 different data objects in a material master record. And in the SAP GUI and in Fiori, it can often be 18, somewhere between 18 and 30 different screens that you are learning and having to put data into. So a huge amount of manual data entry, a significant opportunity for error in there, and extremely time consuming. You know, we've got examples of customers who just to manually make a change in a material record, it was going to take them, you know, between 6 and 10 minutes, which may not sound like a lot, but if you've got thousands of those things to change, you're literally talking about a full-time job for somebody. So material master creation, one of the things we do is we look at it and go, okay, there's a lot of data in here. We put guardrails around it using business rules. So we embed business rules into forms in our Evolve product. And that embedding business rules is often the thing that takes the most amount of time. And it takes a lot of time for a couple of different reasons. One, there's a heavy reliance on subject matter experts, on tacit internal knowledge to create those business rules. Now, again, looking after the pandemic, this has actually become much more problematic for us. It's estimated that during the pandemic, somewhere between 4 and 6 million Americans took early retirement. Now, expand that worldwide, and there's a huge number of people who walked out of the door and are now sitting on a beach or on a golf course somewhere trying to forget everything they learned. So there's a massive amount of that tacit knowledge and those SMEs who are no longer in our organizations. So putting those business rules in place based on long-term knowledge within the organization is tougher than ever. And then the other one is with so many of these SAP processes, they're cross-functional processes. You know, to create a material, you're often talking about procurement and master data and your manufacturing team and production planning and hundreds of others, controlling, you name it. And gaining cross-functional alignment and agreement on what those business rules need to be can be unbelievably time consuming. So we've got examples of customers where we know that you can build the automation solution in, let's say, a couple of months. But we have customers who have taken literally over a year to a year and a half to define their business rules. So it becomes massively complex and time consuming just to do that part of it. The automation itself is relatively quick to put together, but building those things internally can be difficult. So you can eliminate the need for a lot of these things simply looking at artificial intelligence. How do you apply artificial intelligence? And use predictive AI to give you that, to speed up that process and give you the efficiency that you're looking for. So master data creation processes with intelligent autocomplete, as you'll hear us talk more about. So predictive AI, intelligent autocomplete, same thing. You'll open up, you'll do let's say it's again, materials, because that's what we're starting with. You'll do a new material creation request, and you may put in just a little bit of data. The model will then take that, read that little bit of data you've put in, and based on what that algorithm has learned and the training that you've done with it, it will actually predict your field outcome values for everything in that material master record. And it'll do it very, very quickly. And so what you will get is often what we expect to be able to deliver to you is this. Instead of it being a form, it is a completely filled out form with confidence levels listed in it. So let's say green is 95 to 100% confident. Blue is 80 to 94% confident. And anything that's not blue or green has a low confidence level, meaning you absolutely either need to fill it in or you need to review it and correct it or make sure it's correct and confirm it. Now, over time, what this does for you, and you can launch that very quickly. So you don't have to build all those business rules. You just build a small set of business rules, and it then has learned from its algorithm what the rest of the rules are for that material record. So over time, though, as you correct and as you approve material record creation, it basically learns more. So maybe 6 months after you launch the solution, green is no longer 95 to 100%, it's 98 to 100%. And blue is no longer 80 to 94%, it's 95 to 98%. So huge amount of benefit to this, and just the amount of time you can gain by not having to do all that manual data entry, and the data quality that you improve by getting rid of just transposition error or transcription errors and things of that sort can be hugely beneficial to your organization. So that's where we see artificial intelligence coming in and being available very, very quickly. And you're going to see it sometime in second half of 2024, directly from Precisely. If you are interested, type it into the question box. We will be happy to get back in touch with you, because we are looking right now for early adopter customers. So what are some of the benefits that you get from this? Well, you improve that data entry and decision making through those recommendations that the algorithm is giving you. You're going to improve your data quality, because obviously you're no longer having to worry about that human error part of it. The machine learning and the algorithm, based on your historical records and based on everything that it learns after initial training, is going to continue to make sure that the data that you're putting in is correct and accurate to the best of its ability. So your data quality, your initial data quality, goes up significantly. And you've got background checks that are happening as well. Complexity of determining business rules. Now it's learning from your history, what are the business rules that you've applied? So you're not having to figure out from a group of people, well, what business rules we want here. It just looks at the way you've done processes in the past and applies those rules. So you have fewer hard-coded rules. Usually the ones that we see people most interested in the hard-coded rules when you're doing it this way is, it's it's permissions, it's security, things like that, but not in terms of the process itself. And finally, it reduces that time to value, because now you're able to take that small group of rules and apply them almost immediately. The algorithm has learned your other rules from your history, and you're able to get that automation up and running very, very quickly. So that's what we talk about when we look at artificial intelligence as it relates to automation, as it relates to digital transformation. So there is a lot of opportunity that we see across the board with what you can do in terms of automation and artificial intelligence for SAP master data processes. So hopefully that helped. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Paul. And Paul is going to tell you a little bit more about ERPfixers, and he's really going to drill down on the benefits of automation and artificial intelligence for finance processes. So, Paul?
Thanks, Andrew. That was a nice insight into what not just is coming in the future, but what we have right now. It's a brave new world.
Yeah.
So I'm going to share my screen, and think you're already sharing, Andrew. I'm just going to start. Okay, yes. So we want to, okay.
Let me stop sharing. There we go.
So, okay, thank you very much. So hello again, everyone. I'm going to just pause for a couple of moments to for my screen to be shared.
Yep, you got it.
Excellent. So I'll start. I just have a few slides, like 5 or 6 slides, talking about, first of all, the company, ERPfixers, and then moving on to, as Andrew said, some specific use cases for artificial intelligence and machine learning in the financial space. But I think, if any, for those of you not in the financial space of SAP, you can definitely extrapolate that into other modules. As you know, SAP is, the good thing about SAP, which lends itself to some of this, is that a lot of things are pretty uniform, right? As long as you abide with best practices. And so you can definitely see some benefits in one area being applied to other areas. Start with ERPfixers. So this is a company I founded about 8 years ago, right? I gave you a brief introduction about myself. I was a consultant for actually I've been a consultant about 26 years now. Yeah, maybe a little over. The last 10 years, after about 15, 16 years, I wanted, other people kind of like me doing what I did, solo consultants, but to get together in a network, a collaborative network, to help with different core functionalities in SAP. And so that's how ERPfixers was born. We call ourselves the top quality experts, and hopefully that's the value we provide to customers. Some of our offerings are your SAP implementation and support in the core modules, best practices assessment. Now that obviously S/4HANA, a lot of customers are either on S4 or planning to go to S4. There's a huge kind of momentum to to bring your system to best practices so you can leverage core SAP functionality as opposed to using custom codes and things like that. Material ledger is one of my specialist areas. For those who don't know, it's a module in the product costing part of SAP, which allows you to calculate an actual cost for your inventory, for your cost of sales, for your WIP. And just a fun fact, in the past, when you talk of SAP ML, that used to stand for material ledger. My eyes will light up when I see ML. Now machine learning has taken over. So anytime I see SAP ML, like in Sapphire, for example, you see ML, I'm like, oh, they have material ledger sessions. It's machine learning. But now we're bringing those two together. So hopefully I'll still be as impressed when I see ML, SAP ML. We have some custom reports. We do kind of some sophisticated things like cost component reports and splitting your actual and standard cost by different dimensions. And then we're also obviously in this day and age, with 2027 down the road, very soon, it seems it's kind of really kind of coming speedily, quicker, sooner than later. A lot of customers are also thinking about how do we get from where we are, all the stuff we have in ECC to S4. So if you need more information, our website is www.erpfixers.com. Okay. So now let's get into it. How can AI be leveraged for SAP financial processes? Let's start off with master data. Now, I know Andrew has talked about master data and Precisely has a tool which will be coming out soon for the material master. But again, you can kind of, based on some of the things he said, you can also extrapolate that to financial master data, because there are definitely parallels between the two and any master data in SAP. So what's the use case for AI? First of all, cleansing and standardizing master data entries. Obviously, we've seen this before where we have, the same field, or there's the entry in a field in SAP that is meant to be the same, but are either entered in two different ways, or because of the way the master data is maintained, you have multiple of the same thing in the system, and it's inaccurate. So in this case, the use case for AI is to help cleanse that, standardize the master data across the system, right? And anyone who, I'm sure people on this webinar are SAP users for the most part. The master data is everything, right? Bad master data, everything is like a house of cards, right? Everything crumbles if you don't have good master data. Performing real-time validation checks. Now, obviously, SAP has its own validation checks, right? There's certain things, if you enter in a field, if either that field is the drop-down of that field doesn't contain the value you entered, or if it violates something fundamental to SAP, you get some kind of warning or error message, right? But still, that is specific to standard SAP and maybe a few other things, like if you have validation rules set in. But this kind of explodes that, right? You think of it more from a business-specific perspective. You can have these checks, because not every business validates data the same way, right? So yes, it could be more specific, obviously enhance the integrity of the data. Preventing data inconsistencies. I mentioned earlier that, duplicate data records that's a big thing in SAP, not only because of a legacy system, which you had legacy systems that had things recorded differently than SAP. You bring it into SAP, inadvertently you have two different master data, which is the same thing. Could be two vendors, right? Two vendors that are the same, or two customers, or something else, right? So this would help eliminate that, maintain a single source of truth. You could also have it in SAP, you have a lot of acquisitions, mergers happening right now, two companies, right? And you have them in one system now. And instead of having a holistic customer master record, you would have one that has, the same vendor or customer, but just because it came from this different source company, it's a different record in SAP. So again, this is something that would help eliminate. And then continuous monitoring of master data changes, just to make sure. So you can see AI as, triggering alerts or warnings when something that is entered in real time doesn't comply with what the company's internal policy or regulations will require. So that's master data. So let's get into like 2 or 3 transactional processes in SAP. Let's start with AP. So with accounts payable, and again, a lot of this is hopefully not too far-fetched, because in one way or shape or form, they exist right now, but this is just taking it to a different level, right? I can't think of any of these from an AI standpoint, which you don't have in some way right now, but it's just maybe not as sophisticated. So the first one is streamlining invoice processing using OCR. So basically, instead of manually typing the invoice into the system, right, the AI can grab based on certain familiar texts or fields in the paper invoice. It can extract that into the SAP system and populate the relevant fields in a vendor invoice. Again, that's happening right now. The companies whose whole business model is OCR. Okay, but think of that again as a more streamlined way of doing invoice processing. Also, as a follow-on from that is automating data extraction. So the whole point of this is reduce manual entry, right? Not necessarily to reduce who's doing it, but let them do something less robotic, right? And reduce, because, and of course, manual entry, you have these accounts payable teams that are entering hundreds of invoices every day. And of course, no matter how good you are, there could potentially be errors. And obviously with invoices, you want to enter it correctly, because you'll be paying paying the vendor a wrong amount if you don't enter it right. Matching invoices with purchase orders, right? For those of you who know this process, when you're matching an invoice with a purchase order, the system looks at the amount, the quantity of the invoice, and sees that the purchase order has the same thing, or at least within a tolerance. If it breaches the tolerance, you get something, right? That something could take many forms. Could be workflow that routes it to somewhere else. But with AI, again, it boosts this, right? It doesn't, I find the configuration for duplicate invoice check and also for matching price and quantity discrepancies pretty outdated. It hasn't changed almost since I started, right? And if it's not done right, it's not as intuitive as it would be under AI if you have an AI tool that's doing this. Also, obviously helping payment cycles by having a more seamless workflow that routes the invoices to the appropriate stakeholders for approval, right? So kind of to speed up that cycle process. So that is some use cases in the accounts payable module. How about accounts receivable? Obviously, this is where you're talking about cash flow, right? So you would have AI, machine learning, do some prediction on how the cash flow of your organization will be based on history. Andrew mentioned this briefly about the predictive side of AI, which is more, I look at history, I see what the pattern is, and I predict what is going to happen. So it would help to identify trends and patterns and how the customer pays, and hence predict the company's cash flow. Also identifying late paying customers. Okay, recently, maybe it's turned around, but definitely around the COVID time, that was a big thing. Late paying customers that were breaching the payment terms. And this will also identify that and at least flag it to the company for further action. It would also help with segmenting customers based on the payment behavior, the risk, and other factors. Help categorize the customers so that you know who to target based on certain communication methods. And then also using external data sources, credit reports, financial statements. It's the other thing about AI. It's not so you look at it in 2 ways. You look at it in one way of looking at internal data, right? Data within the company, historical data it can use to predict or classify things, but then also external data, right? That's something, there's some tools in SAP right now that do that, but that could do with definitely use improvement, because SAP is pretty insular, right? It does perfect what you have in there, but there's always some heavy lifting to get to extract data from outside and blend it with what's in SAP. So that's accounts receivable. Financial forecasting and planning now. If you hopefully understood what we said before about predictive AI, that's where it comes in here. It's more from a financial standpoint. It's about forecasting and planning. One of the big asks or requirements that came out the last four years, maybe 5 years, is how can I predict what my future financials are going to be based on variables that I can't control. Now, again, like I said before, we've always had things like this, right? You can have there's model, you can do modeling in SAC and certain things, but pretty much more automated, like integrating data from, again, like you said, historical data or market data, also operational data. So not just what's going on in FICO in the financial part of SAP, but what's going on in the market, right? What's going on with my competitors? What's going on with my operational data within my system? And let me use that to predict what that could potentially mean for my bottom line. Pattern recognition, obviously a big thing with AI. It's looking at patterns of what happened in the past to predict what happened in the future. Okay, what's the trend of my cash flow, the trend of my revenue, my expenses, my cost of goods sold. Risk evaluation, also another big part of this, is evaluating risks and uncertainties with the forecast. So even if everything is looking good in the company, what's happening outside? Is there market volatility? Is there, don't like to say this, but everyone knows what happened with the pandemic, totally disruptive. And obviously some of these things you can't, there's only so much prediction you can do. But at least people are more aware, coming out of the last 4 or 5 years, more aware of, hey, listen, we can't just, have this blinkered view of what our results are going to be. We have to not only look at the external, look at what's happening outside the company, but look at what could potentially happen and how that's going to impact my financials. And then visualization. Again, now we have visualization tools, both in SAP with SAC and even other things like Click, Tableau, all that stuff. But this will be AI generated, not necessarily, this will be very seamless with the source data and would help you create reports and communicate financial forecasts to stakeholders, have interactive dashboards, charts, and all that good stuff. Okay. So let's summarize the benefits of AI for financials. All these points I've mentioned to some extent in the prior slides. So first is real-time validation to ensure data integrity. Very important for master data. As I said, master data, backbone of most SAP implementations. We talked about elimination of duplicate entries, talked about real-time checks on modifying master data to make sure they comply with either internal or external requirements. Automating processing and data processing and extraction. Another part of this is, well, how do we get rid of the robotic tasks? Now, again, there's other tools that do this before AI. We have RPA. Even before that, we had tools in SAP like that you can schedule or record or testing tools and things like that. But again, just more sophisticated than that. Improving decision-making and compliance. Doing some of these things would assist with making more effective decisions, more accurate decisions, and actually more real-time decisions than waiting till a certain point. And that's another thing about waiting. Why there's a huge use case, and not to diminish any of the other modules in SAP, but a couple of things with the financial module is, one, in an organization, the department that has the most access to information is the finance department. In fact, I'm a reformed accountant, so I know that accountants were teased for that because they're the guys just in the weeds, right? And everyone else is doing real life stuff, accounts. But it was somewhat of a disadvantage or a stigma. But now, as you know, Andrew was saying this, the intersection between data and process, data is like a currency now, right? So it puts us in a very pivotal position in the organization. So it does help with decision making, just having all this to be more seamless. Detecting anomalies, hopefully that is pretty clear. If you have a tool that's checking things in real time, it can also identify things that are not within the standard. And then finally, predicting future behavior. I mentioned this as part of Andrew mentioned it too, as part of the kind of the other segment, the one that we're focusing more on with AI is predictive as opposed to generative. So that predicts future behavior based on historical trends. Okay, so I'm going to hand it back to Andrew, and he's going to take us into a discussion, a summary, and we will wrap up after that. So I'm going to stop sharing here and hand over to Andrew.
And we're back. So that was great, Paul. Thank you. And it's interesting. I think, like you said, one of the beauties of SAP is there's a consistency, whether you're dealing with financial data, whether you're dealing with customer master data, vendor materials, really anything across there. It is wonderfully consistent. I did have a question though, and just to get your thoughts on this. One of the things about automation when it first came out was everybody went, "Oh my God, it's going to replace people," and a lot of people were measuring it on FTE replacement. It's never really quite worked out that way. It's actually turned out to be a helper for most people. It's made them more efficient. It's allowed them to do their job better. It's allowed them to do other things. Now you're seeing a lot of people talk about how AI is going to replace a lot of people and a lot of analysts and so forth. What's your feeling about it, especially in the SAP world? Is AI going to replace SAP analysts, or is it really just going to make them, turbocharge their ability to do their jobs even more? I think you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah,
That's okay.
Good question, and it's also a hard question to answer because I can tell you what I think. Right, what I think is I don't think it's going to replace people, and the reason I say that is not just because it's a hope, which I do hope it doesn't, but also because we've been talking. When I implemented SAP, one of my first implementations back in the late 90s, right? One of the big reasons for resistance to SAP was, oh, it's going to take my job. This was back in like 1998. Listen, this was 20 something years ago. Did that happen? No. In fact, if anything, it created a whole new industry of people, my industry. When I started, I didn't think I'll be an SAP consultant now. I thought I'd just do a few projects and move on, get a real job. I don't think so. I think for me, I think based on past experience, I think it would create opportunity. Now, having said that, are there some companies that are going to use AI as an excuse to lay people off? Of course. In fact, it's already happening. Okay. Yeah. But I just think I can only base it based on my experience and partially hope that it's not going to happen. And if it does, there's going to be a balance between moving away from robotic manual processes to more analytical and process-based skill sets.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And I think we feel sort of the same way. I mean, we ran into, as Wind Shuttle, and again, now it's precisely, we ran into early on a lot of resistance. It's like, and it wasn't, people buying the software were like, oh, this is great. It does so much. But the people actually asked to use it were like, this is going to take my job. And it's not. Excuse me. Now, one of the other things, and you touched on this a little bit, was especially in the reporting side for financials. What's your thoughts around, is AI going to change the way we look at financial reporting? Because it feels like it can do a level of comparative analysis and an understanding of our history so much better than current tools. Do you think it's going to really have that effect in terms of what financial reporting looks like, or do you think it's going to, again, not quite have that? It's kind of overblown at this point.
Well, on what the financial reports look like, I think what has the trend, and I think AI is just part of this trend. The trend for financial reports over at least a couple of decades that I've been working has been two-dimensional to multi-dimensional analysis. And I say two-dimensional because originally a financial report was just balance sheet, income statement, cash flow, right?
Right.
Mostly to satisfy external parties, government, bank.
Regulatory agency. Yeah.
It's moved more towards, and the management accounting was just in the background. If you want to do management accounting, do it in an Excel spreadsheet. So now it's much more than that because, first of all, as you can see with SAP did this with the Universal Journal, they have merged financial and management accounting so you can get the same kind of integrity as you do with external, but with internal kind of slicing and dicing and multi-dimensional reporting. So what I think how AI would help that, and we've talked about this a little bit, is with the predictive nature of AI, that is going to help kind of change the way we view a financial report. We're not just looking at it for, okay, what is my bottom line? Is it profitable or not? It's not. It's okay, even if I'm profitable now, okay, how does that tie up with what could potentially happen, right? Based on
Right.
certain variables, based on economic factors, competition, um, who knows what's out there. I think the tool or the ability for AI to have algorithms and other factors to incorporate into a financial report will make it richer, will make it more multidimensional, and I think it'll give it more use. There'll be more use cases for reports than just, hey, what is my profit? What is my revenue? What's
Right.
my balance sheet? So I think that's how it changes. I actually also think that is why accountants, and someone has said this before, I don't know, don't say I said it, but accountants, the accounting role is going to move more to the analytic role. You're going to have a shift from
Yeah.
accounting to like because the accounting role, frankly, is a little more. You can see that being easily replaced, right?
Yeah.
Analytical role, not so much, at least right now.
So along those lines and related to that, and when you talked about material ledger earlier, and I know you are the person I know who knows more about material ledger than almost anybody. How does AI change things like profitability analysis and margin analysis? Because it feels to me like that predictive side of it can give you a view that you don't have to now. It feels like now it's all backward looking instead of forward looking.
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. That's already happening right now. Not necessarily the tool to do it, but the the desire from management. So I give you an example. We've had a couple of projects recently where we have had to create a custom report to do a predictive material ledger.
Hmm.
So for example,
Oh,
yeah, so for
interesting.
example, right, as you said, material ledger, if we want to just hone in on that, material ledger takes past information to calculate an actual cost, right? So that means you've done your
Yeah.
PO, your good receipts, your invoices, get your variances, calculate actual cost. Now, this customer said, no, but we also want to take into account a purchase order that has not been received. But we know the actual cost from the purchase order because that's the PO price. We also know our standard cost. So we can actually get variances, quote unquote, based on purchase order cost not received versus standard cost. So if you wanted to say, we're in May, if you want to say in September, what will my actual cost be? We can do that. So all this, we had to
Oh,
create a
interesting.
very complex custom program to do that.
Yeah, I can
Imagine
imagine.
what we could do if we had an AI tool with margin analysis to do that. That'll be much more seamless. So like I said, the requirement is already there.
Yeah.
This tool, I think, will match that. It just makes the way you look at financial information just much more kind of sophisticated, much more multifaceted than we have right now.
Um, so what are some of the things as people in the SAP space start to look at AI and consider how they're going to apply it, what are some of the key things you believe they need to really take into consideration before they pull that trigger?
Yeah. Well, I've already started having discussions, you know, obviously you want to start with a business, what's the business case? Don't just
Yeah.
don't just take all the hype and just just jump in blind. You have to have a business case. What are these big ticket items that you want to solve? I would say start small. Don't start big. Start small. If you have the money and you want to throw money at it, that's another thing. But
Yeah.
start small. Take one thing, just as you discussed with Precisely's tool and things like that. Just say, oh, is master data. What's the beast of master data that I want to kind of make more automated, less manual entry, less kind of opportunity for errors?
Yep.
Material master or business partner or something that that is so convoluted to maintain. So take something small, take something like that. Also consider from a reporting perspective, how do you want to, for some of these things we're talking about, what do you want to, what kind of variables do you want to factor into reports to make them more meaningful to how you're doing right now and how you potentially could do things. Also take into account the discussions we're having right now, some of the customers that are still kind of a little skeptical or just cautious. It's to do with the risk factor. How can you protect, if you're going to go this route, how do you protect your organization from like some rogue, not just rogue human beings, rogue AI, meaning you're getting the wrong data. How do you ensure that the data you're getting that you are going to make business decisions on is reliable? So I think just off the top of my head, just a few things that need to be considered when you're embarking on this journey.
Yeah, and I will just add to that as we get ready to wrap up that in terms of that reliability of data, I mean that's beyond the automation part of Precisely. That is what the rest of the organization really focuses on, is that whole idea around data integrity and how do you get your data AI ready? So how do you make sure that your AI is not hallucinating? How do you make sure that when it gives you something back and you go, oh, this looks great, it's not too good? And it's based on data that it has either misinterpreted or the data was entered incorrectly. So real quick before I do my little pitch and wrap up, any final thoughts? Any final advice for people who are looking at this as kind of the next step in their SAP journey?
Yeah, there's a lot of it. The AI is the hottest thing right now. I'd say get as much information as you can about it. Don't trust just one source or the other. Get as much information. Have some kind of use case. If you already have some of the tools, or if you're planning on doing it, have a prototype before you pull the trigger. Have just start small. I said this before. Don't go full. Don't go full hog with AI. Just start with one thing, one pain point that this could alleviate. We discussed some of them on this webinar. Start small, see how it goes, and then expand it into other areas.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I'll be back for a final word in just a second. But I do want to thank everyone for being here. I know your time is valuable, and we do appreciate that you have chosen to spend it with us. If you want to know a little bit more about Precisely, in addition to our SAP automation side, we are the leader in data integrity, which means that we give you the accurate, consistent, and contextualized data that you need for making confident business decisions and really focusing on how do you get your data AI ready, as I mentioned before. We've got about 12,000 customers worldwide in over 100 countries. We're in 99 of the Fortune 100, and we've got relationships with many of the leading brands in the world. They trust us with their data, and hopefully after you've seen this, you will trust us with yours. And definitely let's continue this conversation. Again, I appreciate that you are here. You can find more information at precisely.com, as well as if you really have an idea or really want to have a burning question for us, please give us a call. We are happy to help you. And as I mentioned earlier, also, we are looking for early adopter customers for our AI solution for Material Masters. So if you really want to be a part of that, definitely get in touch with us. As I said, you can write something just in the questions and somebody will get back to you, probably from our product management team. But otherwise, I really want to thank everyone for being here. I do appreciate that you have spent your time with us. Paul, once again, final thoughts?
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Precisely. Thanks, everyone, for, as Andrew said, your time is valuable. So thanks for spending it with us, and have a good rest of your day.
Yeah. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great day. Bye.